Hello again, folks. So today I'm going to share my top tips on how to avoid compulsive collecting. And it's a topic that came to mind because I recently received this box. Before I open it, I think the place to begin is to admit that I've struggled with compulsive collecting over the years. And it's through mistakes that I've learned where my line is and how I can find enjoyment out of collecting and not cross into the compulsive nature that I think a lot of us have and that I have. And so I thought I'd do a quick video on my top tips for how to avoid being compulsive when we collect stuff, and also look at some cool stamps. So I'm going to get to the joyful looking at stamps, I promise. If you want to skip ahead, feel free. We will be looking at some cool stamps. But I need to start with a story about me and about my collecting. It began when I was a boy, and my brother and I, my older brother and I, would grab a couple of quarters and walk to the convenience store on the corner of our block, and we'd buy a pack of baseball cards. And then we'd hustle home and rip it open, hoping to find one of our beloved Chicago Cubbies. And it started as a real joyful hobby that I shared with my brother. And from there, we actually moved. We moved to another town, and it was very, very hard on me. And I found solace in baseball cards, in the ripping open of packs, the adrenaline of searching for whatever card I was after. It became a form of escape. And slowly, as I needed to escape more and more from hard times with my family, from hard times at school, it started to blur the line into compulsivity, into needing the fix that I got from ripping open a pack of baseball cards. When I became a young man and I moved on and went to college, none of us collected cards in the dorms, but there were other things that we did to escape. And I used those for many years as a way of dealing with the pain in my life and avoiding responsibilities that I found too burdensome. And so my compulsivity became even more destructive. It became about using drugs and alcohol to avoid, whatever I felt I needed to avoid because I didn't feel up to the challenges of the day. Thankfully, that all changed when I put a cork in the bottle and I started to address the real sources of pain in my life, and I started to heal and I started to grow. And it was about then that I found baseball cards again. And what I ended up doing was transferring the compulsivity, the compulsive nature I still had, to baseball cards. And I became a compulsive collector. Around then, I realized that I was transitioning from being using, drugs and alcohol to using baseball cards in the same way. So I put those down and I found stamps. And stamps had a level of enjoyment and low stakes and endless fascination to me about things that weren't adrenaline filled, weren't dopamine filled, weren't based on, chasing the big hit that you get in card collecting and elsewhere, but were about history and art and appreciating things that I love. And so I dove into the hobby. And as I am compulsive by nature, I dove hard. Especially during the pandemic, I collected a lot of stamps. Along the way, I developed some strategies to avoid compulsive collecting. And that's what I want to share now. And I also have come to appreciate when enough is enough. And that's the line for me of healthy collecting and enjoying a hobby. Unfortunately, like all of us, I am a work in progress. And though I am far more healthy than I was as a young man, I still make compulsive mistakes like this one. And so I'm going to open it. I am going to tell you the story of how it came into my life. And then I am going to share with you my tips and tricks on how to avoid being compulsive with your collecting. I would also appreciate it if you have tips to please drop them in the comment section below. Or, if you've struggled with compulsive collecting, please feel free to tell your story if you're so inspired. All right, with that, let's look at some stamps. Alrighty, so it was late one night. I was in bed. I had my phone. And I hop on eBay, and I used that eBay trick that I've talked about elsewhere. And along came this album. The first thing to note is that Mrs. Silk was sleeping on the couch. And no, not for reasons you might think. Mrs. Silk has developed a snoring situation that she probably doesn't want me talking about. But I am. And she was working on figuring out a solution. So she was sleeping on the couch. What that meant was that I was alone. It was late at night. And along came this opportunity. On the screen, right there, is an acronym. HALT. It is the best tip I have for avoiding compulsive behaviors in your life. Doesn't matter what it is. What it stands for is hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. When you are any of those four things, you are susceptible to making compulsive decisions. And so, in that situation, I'm pretty sure I wasn't hungry, but I was alone, or I was angry because I'd had a really bad day at work. I was lonely, because Mrs. Silk was in the basement with her app trying to figure out the situation. And I was tired because it was late at night. And so I should have known better, because in that moment, I was susceptible to making a compulsive decision. And that's what this is. So this is a Scott Specialty Series album, which I really like. And it's for Canadian stamps, which I love. Oh, that's cool. Look at that great new stamp. 13-cent from the Jubilee set. Oh, that's cool. I like that. So, this album came along, and I snatched it up. And the reason I snatched it up was the price. It was about $30. So, what I knew was that I was getting a great deal. And I knew that I could find all kinds of different ways to repurpose this album. I mean, just the pages alone, I knew I could repurpose. I knew I could repurpose this Specialty Series binder. And so I was thinking maybe I could use this for that purpose, was I think my rationale. But here's the truth. Oh, that's a cool stamp. That's a nice 3 cent. I love that series so much. Isn't that a great cancel? Oh, that's very cool. It's a great shape, too. 1897 cancel. That's very cool. So, the truth of the matter is, I love that map stamp. Dude, look at that great cancel. Socked on the nose. I like that. And the Queen Victoria stamps. That's cool. So it's not a mistake, a compulsive act because of the price. You know, $30 is about what I'm willing to spend on albums these days. What makes this a compulsive act is that I ultimately don't need this. I just don't. I have a Canadian Specialty Series album already. I think I was imagining reusing this for some purpose. And but more to the point, it was so cheap. And I thought, well, I'll figure out a way to use it. And so I snatched it up. And in doing so, I acted compulsively. That's a great cancel on that 10. I didn't recognize halt. Once again, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And more importantly, I didn't stick to my focus. I didn't stick to what I'm collecting right now. When it comes to stamps, the possibilities are so endless. So if you fall into the compulsive trap with stamps, you can find yourself going in 1,000 different directions. Because there is a lot to be fascinated by. The second tip I wanted to share is to say, look at this. I mean, they're taken out. They're cherry picked. This was a mistake. The second thing I wanted to say, this was a buy it now situation. So I snatched this up pretty quickly on a buy it now. When it comes to auctions, that's where you can really get into trouble as a collector. Because you get emotional about what you're bidding on. You really want it. Sometimes you get into a bidding war. And the trick I have found that keeps me from overspending is the simple statement, there will always be a next one. When it starts to count down, the 10, 9, 8 to the end of the auction, if somebody jumps in ahead of you, there will always be a next one. And what that allows me to do then is the final and most important tip, especially for those of us that have other financial obligations, is to set a budget and to be very strict with it. When the issue with compulsive behavior is the shame cycle that it can fuel. So you act compulsively, then in the morning or sometime later you regret, you feel shame about your decisions, and then that fuels another compulsive act. So for me, the times that I feel most ashamed is when I spend money I don't have. So stick to a budget. If you're a stamp collector, stick to your focus area. Remember halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If you find yourself in a auction setting, the reminder is there will always be a next one. And it's, those tips are how I've been able to set my boundaries for healthy collecting and finding enjoyment in this wonderful hobby. And unfortunately, I made a mistake on this one, and I will find a way to repurpose this album. But more importantly, it's an opportunity to share a couple of tips with you all, along with somewhat of a personal story of my journey thus far, and why I still find such enjoyment in individual stamps like that. Just little ones, because having that stamp is enough. and being able to focus on that and learn what that ship is if I wanted to, that is enough. And that is ultimately what an enjoyable hobby can bring to you, so long as you set the parameters for yourself. I hope this was helpful. If so, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel. It means a great deal to me. Until next time.